So, this is my fifth video in 5 days, or fourth video in 4 days, I think. And I wanted to talk about some mental hospital experiences. Um, let's see. So, the one that comes to mind was maybe, I don't know, 6 years ago or so. And I got there. I don't remember why, really. I wasn't in a good state. I was involuntarily committed. I think I might have called a bomb threat on myself that time. Um, I thought I was gonna be like assaulted or tortured or something, and I saw this whole conspiracy in the neighborhood that I lived in, and so I was like trying to build a time bomb, but I had no idea of how to do it. And so then I called the police on myself and I said, "Hey, I'm making a bomb," and they showed up with a shotgun, and they asked me to get down on the ground, and they were going to use whatever force was necessary. And the ambulance pulled up and wheeled me away. I said I was mentally ill. The news team showed up and tried to interview me, and I was like, no, I'm just delusional. Nothing actually happened. And so I went to across the water uh, to the east to a nice hospital, but it was just the worst ward, like worst mental health. Like someone went to, he got sent to Western State, which was a long-term mental hospital, and he was wearing like black loose pants with black bandanas on them, and he would scream, laugh like every, I don't know, 3 5 minutes. Really out of it, really manic. I don't know what happened. It was probably drugs. And I met this guy named Grim there. Like, I didn't really talk to him or anything. Like, I was just kind of in an agitated state. I was pissed off that I had to be there. I was going to court and, like, you know, failing at representing myself in court. I did have a public defender, but I was just in a poor state. And so I'm talking about Grim because I met him in a different hospital a year ago. But basically, how it happened was, um, I should probably get to that later. Like, okay, so I spent a night up all night talking with this woman in the mental hospital, and she um, was like sent there because she was living in an RV with her baby son, and she was like smoking marijuana, and like the RV was filling with marijuana, and she thought it was funny that her son would cough on the smoke or whatever. And so I found these things out about her, but it used to be kind of a thing when I was younger to like kind of ride the mania or psychosis and just free associate and bond with people. And I drifted away from her. There was so much stimulation, so much to keep track of. I was like, oh, no thanks. She had to get her intestines pumped because she was really blocked up. And after that, I don't know if she was embarrassed or just like, projecting or whatever, but she started calling me a womanizer and stuff like that. And there was a guy that showed up to the ward, and he screamed at everyone that he was the Grand Wizard of the KKK, and he needed to be put on the maximum dose of Seroquel, which would have just totally fried him. Like, I thought for a while, like, oh, that must have actually been a KKK member. He had a white beard, like a wizard, and like white hair, and looked kind of, bulgy eyes, bulgy belly, like. And then I was like, that could have been anybody. He just thought he was the Grand Wizard of the KKK. So anyway, my interaction was with Grim as there was a TV room. There was milk you could get out of the fridge. People would sit and watch TV and get up, and I sat down in a chair and I took the remote, and Grim said, "Hey, you took my chair," and I was like, "Yeah, I took your remote too." And then I drank the milk that was sitting on the counter, and the milk was curdled. So I was like, "Oh, instant karma!" Like, but a crowd gathered around him, and this wasn't. This was going to be a fight. You know, I don't know how the crowd knew to gather around him instead of me. Like, the dynamics of the mental hospital are really mysterious. Um, and they saw what was happening, the nurses did, and they sent me up to like the nice ward from like the worst ward in the hospital. The other guy that punched me was like a 60-year-old man named Orville that had his own room with a note taped to the door that said Orville. And he was maybe suffering from dementia or just an older man with mental health problems. And he was kind of seething the whole time. We had a group where we sat in a circle in the day room, and he pulled his pants down and pissed all over everybody, which you don't see very often. And he punched me in the stomach, and I retaliated by slamming the door as hard as I could. And if his fingers were over the door molding, his fingers might have been sliced off. You know, I wasn't really thinking. Everybody's angry if they're involuntary. I got sent up to the nice ward, and it was calm. They had paintings, and a few things I remember. I did some math equations, just using intuition and like using numbers to represent concepts, and you know, you could call it like expressive math. And I brought it over to the medication window, and there was a med nurse there that treated the equations like they were like worth their weight in gold, like valuable. And she was just like, "Wow!" And she asked to photocopy them, and I was like, "Oh, sure." You know, it was at that time when I realized these equations are really nothing. They don't solve anything. But I don't know if she kept those as a souvenir, or I mean, that could have gone in my file. Like, I have no idea. And I made a first timer scream. She was like 18, and I made a comic about the junkies that I had met a few years back. And I gave it to her, like I drew like the meth faces or the alcoholism faces, and I recorded conversations, and I just gave it to her. I was like, "Here, check this out." And she had a screaming panic attack. And I was like, "Oh fuck, okay. I'm gonna stay away from her." I lived as a mime for a day. I decided I just didn't want to talk anymore. Like, I was there for a month, and so I had a small sign that said "I'm a mime," and I didn't talk the whole time. Even if someone talked to me, I didn't talk back. And the medication nurse asked me to answer a question, and um, I didn't answer the question, and she didn't know what was going on. But then she actually came over to me and apologized, and she was like, "Oh, I didn't see your sign. Like, I'm so sorry. You want to be treated as a mime?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay." And it was right before Christmas, and I was still there, and they were talking about holding me past Christmas or past New Year's. And so I just told the doctor in charge that I was going to give myself a coma delusion if he didn't let me out before Christmas. And I was like focusing. Sorry, there's a sports car. I was like trying to convince myself that my reality was just a coma dream, as a bargaining chip. And he did let me out. Um, and I still sometimes think, well, what if I just need to wake up from my coma, you know? So that stuff works, and you probably shouldn't do that. But I got out, and I had like psychotic panic attacks. about the aggressor from my life earlier. The guy that tried to kidnap me. And I took my lithium and lay on the couch, and I watched the city being destroyed by an atomic bomb. And I went to sleep, and then when I was waking up, I had sleep paralysis, and I saw that guy, and he had a smaller than average head, and there was a chanting noise, like chants. Um, some some person was chanting, "The waves of gray came over and over." Um, so I drew that and wrote it down. But yeah, I met Grim again last year, and we finally recognized each other. And he was, sort of cocky, like showing me his journal and the symbols he uses when he stays in shelters. A pineapple for polyamory, a reaper to go along with his name, like the Grim Reaper. And he had developed a meth addiction, and he had lost his home. Like, he was in much better shape 6 years ago. Nice shoes and calm. But he was kind and quiet for the most part, just a good vibe. And he and a woman fell in love there, and she would lay with her head in his lap, and the nurses never called them out on it. And I just drew the whole time and didn't really feel like talking. I'm getting kind of jaded about the whole conversation thing. I get it. But since I was quiet, no one really ever had a problem with me. And if I wanted to say something, I waited to talk, and people felt happy sitting at my table. I was really just trying to do a small amount of emotional labor for everyone, just to try to keep the peace. That's what I learned. Like, if someone wants a conversation, I'll have a conversation with them, but otherwise, I just want to be non-judgmental and positive. The hospital moved 5 of us, including Grim's girlfriend, to a new unit. And we felt like we were the originators of like a new legacy, kind of like a pantheon of the gods before the other people move in. And she talked with Grim on the phone every day, and she told us he was being moved to a housing situation that was dangerous and race segregated by the choice of the tenants, kind of like some prisons or whatever. And he left one day, and I spent the whole time hoping the best for him, talking with his girlfriend, like, this is how serious it is, if it is what it sounds like. I've had experience with toxic housing options. And we were in the lunchroom, and he said that he guessed he would hug me too as he came down the line. And he said, "Stay witchy," and threw up a W. He must have heard that I pulled something off that was strange during Apples to Apples, having a 1 in a million reference to his girlfriend's Taco Bell tattoo, having the Taco Bell card, and she was supposed to judge each card on being aesthetic. So I won that one. The other amazing thing that happened was my artist friend there was making perfect shots with both arms at the same time for the duration of the arcade basketball game. Like, a higher score would nearly not be possible. She was in her 60s and used to be a speedball junkie. But now she was just so on the ball and caring. She did have this symptom. The reason why she was there was she lived in a house. Probably got grandfathered in when you used to be able to get houses with your disability money. And everything that touched the smoke or the vapor from her e-cigarette started buzzing, and she had to spend days removing the buzz from different objects around her house and furniture and stuff like that. And so it was a really complex problem that I just would not have encountered, but it always gets more complex as you get older. So I exchanged numbers with everyone that was part of the lunch table. The convicted banknote forger, the felon with the slicked back hair that could talk for 30 minutes while holding someone's attention. Um, I never saw them again, but that felt like a new step to me. Like, what are we gonna do? Get loaded and act crazy? I didn't have. I have the hunch that we're all the highest maintenance people in our social circles, and we shouldn't really try to start something. I mean, the felon was there for meth psychosis, so it's like he's probably not the most high maintenance person, but he is meeting many, many people in his life and living completely differently, you know. Um, the nurses were just so pleased to have our particular group of people, though, and were really moved that we were all so close and amiable. And I think I played a big part in regulating the space and people's experiences and things like that. Some people go into the mental hospital and they don't think anything they do there is real, and like normal rules don't apply, or like the whole thing is a game and they're the main character. And there was a girl my age that time that wanted me to give her some tattoos on the outside, and I was pretty new there and I wasn't taking contact info. But she sat in a chair facing the room on her last day and started ranting about how she won the mental hospital. And some blonde, strong-looking woman burst in right at the end of her speech and punched her square in the forehead. And I just saw tears pool up in that girl's eyes, and blood trickled down her face like a cartoon show. She left treatment, hung out outside, and then checked herself right back in. Same for the money counterfeiter. He got agitated for having so many women around, and I was his competition, and his aggression just turned into something else, and he started saying racist things and basically ruining his good reputation, like he gave up on his life because he wanted it all and he knew he couldn't get it on demand. He went right back into the same hospital after he got out. Um, when I'm there, I don't ask questions of the system. I don't negotiate anything. I drank black decaf coffee whenever it came in and stayed at single portions instead of petitioning for double food. I never asked for nicotine or medication for the first 2 days because I was fine. And they got their shit together and offered it to me 2 days later, no hard feelings. You know, I got an apology, but it's not a good thing to start, you know, using your ego to, you know, thinking with your ego, basically trying to get as much as you can. Because it only lasted me a week, for instance. I was coming in from not sleeping for 5 nights. Like, I was watching cartoons and movies on surfaces around me and having bouts of paralysis when my imagination took over. And I started dreaming uncontrollably. But I know the drill, and as long as my own survival is not my responsibility, I can relax and reset. Tragic circumstances land us there, and it is not time to be a 5-star gourmet or a 5-star general, you know? Speaking of which, there was a hospital I was at maybe 2 years ago when I had to escape my cartel panic, where there was an Iraq war sergeant that was going to the mental hospital every month or two. And he would drink a bottle or 2 bottles of vodka every day and stay up in the basement of the family home that he built, cleaning his gun every night. He was so volatile that I was afraid if I did anything wrong while he was shouting and patrolling the main room, he would snap my neck on the spot. I got him to play blackjack with me, and we soon had a casino going. No issues, really. We played for jigsaw pieces. He calmed down. I saw another man with the best tattoos I've ever seen, and he saw me looking, so he just came up to me and introduced himself as a carny. I gave him respect. It didn't seem like he respected himself very much, but maybe that didn't even matter because he was living such a fast and interesting life. There was a crip there with 2 teardrops. He talked to me about blood in, blood out. told me about how he was living with his uncle in a safe neighborhood now. And a similar, gangster was there too. And neither of them talked. It was rare. They both talked to me, but they didn't talk to anybody else. And I don't understand that mentality. It's not forced. It's just they have nothing to say, and they were well behaved. I met a woman named Bridget there, a corporate worker with bipolar. She said she was running from her boyfriend who trapped her in a room covered with Nazi posters for weeks. She said she would get walked around in a leather dog mask, like you hear about. First person I've ever met like that. She would get arrested almost every week at this stage of her life. She thought her ex-boyfriend was following her. We exchanged numbers, and she left me her clothes and journals when she left and told me to find her at a hotel downtown. When I got out, I lost her number, but I found her on Facebook months later. She remembered me and offered me her car to borrow. I declined because I can't drive. She asked to sleep on my couch when she got back from her road trip, and I asked if we could get to know each other better first. She had a boyfriend, and we stopped talking, but I had given her my address in case we wanted to meet up, and a week later, I heard an electric drill behind my back gate, and some talking, or ranting, and then the police rolled up and said, "Freeze, you're a racist cracker." And I was thinking it was the cartel, and then I remembered Bridget, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe none of the things she told me were actually true. Like, who knows? My roommate at the hospital was this German kid wearing spooky purple, pink, and black rave clothes, and he was sent there by his parents for watching snuff films. He came down with a cough and fever, and I helped him get help and went and got water for him, and I never came down with anything, surprisingly. The worst mental hospital experience I ever had, besides the literally rancid food the entire time at one place, was recommended to my family by the mother of a Nazi I went to school with and who I felt compassion for, like maybe I could turn his life around. But either way, we were at the same hospital, and both our mothers were there, and they exchanged numbers. I spent a couple days with him, and he was always going in and out of mental hospitals, even trying to get into them when he wasn't in one, by like smashing bottles on his forehead in front of police officers and stuff. And so he was in there with his jack boots doing front flips against the hallway wall. And my mom was there, his mom was there, and this is when they exchanged numbers, and his mom just said, he's like a fish. Because her family's from Samoa. So they talked a bit differently. And so, on the recommendation of his mother, which was really his recommendation, I went to a mental hospital on a native reservation, and there was literally a staff there with a Hitler mustache, and I was like, haha, okay, I get it. And they put me on mega doses of strange medications that made me scream in pain and agony, or feel like I was plugged into an electric outlet, or be unable to read or keep track of any details. I would read the same sentence over and over for a day. I spent an hour literally praying to Jesus, and then left a week later, traumatized for life. And I was ejected, released with a medication from the 80s that I couldn't mix with alcohol, or else I would have had a seizure. I got invited to a nightclub by a Vietnamese woman when I was there, and so I went downtown on the set date with $10 and a cheap suit on. I was famished, so I went to an Irish pub and sat down and ordered a Guinness stew, ate, and then left without paying, and I was accepted into the club. and I realized I could afford a Red Bull, and that was about it. So I had one and met the people, her and her friends, and tried to get with it. But having enough money for one Red Bull is a pretty short night. Um, and I was kind of lost at that point. So Patrick, this Nazi type guy, went to my school, and he was psychotic even in freshman year. He was a very serious case. I don't know how long he had psychosis or whatever he had. And he told me when we were class partners that his dad tried to end his life by locking him in the garage with the car running when he was in kindergarten. Later, I was friends with him on Facebook. Um, at school, the high school I went to for 2 years or 1.5 years or whatever, he had particular fixations on certain students, and he tried to trap this girl's soul inside of a 8 ball from a pool table and stuff like that. He was totally in his own world. But I was friends with him on Facebook, and I was in my 20s, and he was reposting things from neo-Nazi sites like propaganda, and everyone would tell him every day how much they hated him in the comments. And I was like, this guy doesn't have any friends. He's not serious. you know? His life could be over. Like, where is he going after this? And so I said, what's up? And the next thing I knew, I was interviewing him at his house in South Seattle. And he was paranoid about everyone. And he would randomly and savagely attack his younger sister. And there were holes punched in the walls. And his mom was hesitantly grateful or whatever. And she offered to buy us McDonald's or teriyaki. And I didn't like McDonald's as much as I do now. So we opted for the teriyaki. And when she came back with it, he took one bite and told her it tasted like dog food. Yeah, his family was Samoa. He said his dad had some sort of condition where he was wasting away, like, you know, skeleton or something. I never met him. He lived with his extended family in 2 joined houses just next to each other. And he took me to the park at night and told me he had weapons buried all over the place. And he was waiting for his time to strike. Uh, Another day, I don't know if it was that night or not, but we went to Denny's before Latin Mass. And I found out how much I hated Denny's. But his grandparents were there, and we sat in the church, and he talked about how much he hated monotheism and conformity the whole time. And some woman by herself in front of us had to look back and just wonder what was going on. And he would buy me things. He bought me a World of Warcraft subscription. Like, he really appreciated me. And he didn't really have anybody. I think his entire life he never had anybody. And we went to the mall with his new haircut and scarf and told me about his pickup game that he was practicing, which I never needed or looked into. But yeah, let's see. When I when I heard from him, I guess back on Facebook a few years later, he had moved into a group home, which is probably a lot safer for him. And he called me and he wanted to talk philosophically. Like, he made me sound like a dumbass. Like, he was just driving the same points over and over, and then I'd give my answer and he'd say why, and then I'd give my answer and then he'd say why that, and then why that, like. And then he told me he learned a new language from demons called Shadow Speak. And he spoke it to me, and it was jarring. Like, I couldn't sleep that night after listening to this demonic language. He may or may not have signed me up for a bunch of insurance applications because my phone would ring once or twice a week for 3 years asking for Patrick. And I lost contact with him. I don't think he's a Nazi anymore. He's just deeply satanic, which is an improvement for someone that's been frightened and alone his whole life with no opportunities with other people. Um, but yeah, I think this is 4 videos, and it's been really fun. I've just been doing them every day, and obviously I'm going to run out of things. I could get into individual stories, like the minutia of certain situations and things like that. Like, I really enjoy this, but I also encourage, despite my low view count, um, for people to do the same, because like we all want to hear how interesting life can be, you know. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.